We've had this quite extraordinary week for news coming out of Russia with the death of Prigozhin, which I'll ask you to reflect on in a minute. But this, the
Mm.
largest ever drone attack on Crimea, is there a sense that the counteroffensive is entering a new phase, perhaps?
Well, I think there's evidence that the counteroffensive is being slow. It's really hard, grinding work. I think the Ukrainians are moving forward, but it's in hundreds of yards rather than kilometers or hundreds of kilometers. And I think they're also very keen to show the Russian people, including the people in Crimea, that the war comes home to them as well.
Mm.
And so they've been stepping up their drone attacks on Moscow, even more so on Crimea, which is, of course, Ukrainian territory and very strategic territory. So I think it is a message that the entire Russian people are also involved in this, and that Crimea, they're absolutely not going to give up trying to get Crimea back.
And there's been a Ukrainian commando raid which has destroyed one of Russia's most advanced air defense systems in Crimea. Um, Control of the sky is obviously the key aim. These promises of fighter jets after Zelensky toured European capitals have clearly encouraged him, but it won't change anything very soon, will it?
They're not arriving quickly. No, the Dutch, I think, are hoping to get them there by the end of the year. But of course, with the jets have to come all the people who maintain them, who keep them flying, all the spares and supplies they need. So it's a big logistic effort to get fighter jets operating on the ground. Of course, they then immediately become Russian targets as well. So the whole thing needs to be very carefully planned. They will get these F-16s, but it's not going to happen in this fighting season. And clearly, the Ukrainians are finding it heavy going against the very powerful Russian defenses that they're up against.
Mm. There seems to be mixed opinion on how the death of Prigozhin and the other senior Wagner figures might play into all of this. I've been speaking to quite a lot of experts in the last few days who say that it's a sign of Vladimir Putin's weakness. Might that, therefore, in your view, play into Ukraine's hands in the war?
I mean, you've been speaking to people a lot more expert on Russia than I
Yeah,
am.
you're too modest.
Yes, no, clearly there was a display of weakness over the summer. But Prigozhin mounted a coup attempt. Um, Putin said that that was betrayal. He threatened retaliation, and now his plane falls out of the sky and Prigozhin is dead. The evidence trail is clear as to who was responsible for that. I think in the short term, it probably reinforces Putin's grip as the kind of gangland warlord of Russia, who can execute his will wherever he wants. And, if you go against him, well, look what happens to you. That's
Mm.
the message to the anyone who might be thinking of standing up to Putin. In the longer term, yes, I do think that Putin has been seriously weakened by the whole Prigozhin exercise, even more so by his failure to achieve any of his objectives in Ukraine. That is, in the end, I think, what will be the weakness that brings him down. The longer the Ukraine war goes on, the more he fails to achieve anything useful from it, the more Russian casualties mount. That is going to be a real source of weakness for Putin, probably more so than the Prigozhin episode. I mean, my own feeling about the timing of that is that the Russian elite felt they'd separated Prigozhin off from his Wagner forces enough that they could then eliminate him without any great risk of a sort of further uprising of the rank and file Russian forces.
Mm.
And we don't seem to be seeing anything like that at the moment. So perhaps that calculation was right.
Well, I wonder how you think the West should respond to all of this, because it seems awful to say, celebrating anyone's death, but should there be a kind of celebration of this display of Putin's weakness, or is there a risk that the instability that might now unfold could further cause further ructions that could end up being even more deadly and dangerous than what we're seeing at the moment?
I mean, I don't think that we in the West have much, if any, influence on how these things are seen in Russia. I think the message of Putin's absolute brutality has been clear. Our priority has to be to continue to stand behind Ukraine, to give Ukraine all the help that we can, to help them move forward in this campaign. Getting more momentum into their advance would be the most important way of supporting Zelensky and undermining Putin. It is not in anyone's interest that Russia falls into chaotic crisis and separatism and so on. I mean, I don't think we have very much influence one way or the other as to whether that happens. I think we have to keep our eye on the main prize, which is to keep Ukraine strong and moving forward, and count on that in the end being something that brings the whole Putin regime crashing down.
Or can you see the end of the Putin regime in sight on the horizon?
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't think any of us outside Russia really know how it might happen, when it might happen. I think we are in the end game of Putin. He's been there 23 years. He has shown signs of weakness this year. Whether it happens this year or next or in 3 or 4 years' time, there will be an après Putin. That may not be very comfortable either.
Mhm.
But if it's someone who is perhaps from the hardline military elite, who has a better sense of where Russia's real interests lie, rather than the sort of megalomaniac obsession with Ukraine that Putin has, maybe we would in the end be a bit better off. But let's face it, I don't think anybody in the West is going to have much influence over that.